on this episode.
Tonight, we're heading to one of the most iconic landmarks in America, the Grand Canyon.
There are legitimate archaeological digs that go on there and things of that nature, and I know there's been a lot of indigenous American artifacts found at sites, so I get the conservation and preservation of those places, some that are sacred, so I don't disagree that some parts are closed for good reason.
We've seen similarities to ancient Egyptian culture everywhere. And we use ancient Egypt because it's the most popular, right? But if you go down to the Mayans or the Nazca lines or anywhere else in the world, I mean, you can go to China and see pyramids that are built that are very similar to the ones in Giza. A lot of the symbolism is similar. It's not exact, it's similar.
Right.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you're tuning in across the nation or around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Shane Skwarek here with my co-host, Mr. Philipps. And we're back again for another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. And before you all joined us in this episode tonight, Mr. Philipps had the audacity, the gall, the unbelievable fortitude, I can't think of another word that kind of goes in line with that, to ask me if I have made a
fortitude.
drink. This is Cocktails and Conspiracies, Mr. Philipps. I always have a cocktail to talk.
Well, first and foremost,
conspiracy
I want to say that I thought we were getting a hello Vietnam at the beginning.
No, that is
the route you're
my
going. It was a
introduction.
little sad. I know. It sounded a
to
little bit
our
like
old
it.
pal George Norrie, who hap tips his old pal Art Bell, and a little bit of a shout out to everybody out there that listens to one of the two webcasts I do weekly for the last 12 years.
Fair enough.
I do that introduction there as well.
Secondly, what the audience doesn't understand is that 100 times, 100% of the time, we log on a little early, do a little bullshitting, right? Make sure the audios are good, and you always go, be right back, gotta make my drink. That didn't happen this time, which led me to believe you were going sober conspiracy, and I got a little concerned. So I just wanted to make sure. I was concerned about your well-being. I was concerned about the integrity of Cocktails and Conspiracies, so, was just being a good guy. Generally all around a good guy.
I guess if we were doing a show called Sober Conspiracies, that would be a concern, but this is Cocktails and Conspiracies, and it'd quite honestly be sacrilegious if I didn't have a drink, but
it would be. I have a lady drink tonight. I have a White Claw. I'm clawing it up.
A drink is a drink. There ain't no laws when you drink claws. Cheers. I have an orange
Sláinte.
whipped vodka and club soda with a hit of a little lime in there.
I had no energy to make anything. Well, I generally don't make anything fancy anyway. I'm usually drinking a beer. If I'm going to step it up, it's a G&T, but tonight I grabbed whatever was in the fridge, and that was a Claw. I did! You know what I saw today, dude? I saw a high-speed police chase today. I literally witnessed it for about 30 seconds.
Okay. Is there any
pretty
context to that?
No, not really. I just saw a high-speed police chase. I was getting off the Parkway. I was getting off the good old Garden State Parkway here in New Jersey. I don't know, you probably don't get off in Barnegat often, but when you get off, there's two lanes.
All the time. Every single time.
Two lanes, there's the Wawa on the right, and I'm in the left lane, and this white sedan with New York plates just comes blowing down the median, and then crosses both lanes, like weaving in between, I don't know how he didn't hit anybody, weaving in between traffic, and shoots into the Wawa parking lot doing like 50 miles an hour, and I'm like, holy fucking shit, what was that? And like 2 seconds later, a cop chased him in there. Yeah, it was pretty
What
wild.
a strange decision to land in the Wawa parking lot, too. My goodness.
I tell you what, it actually kind of enraged me, right? Because, like, this dude, I kid you not, was doing 50 miles an hour into the Wawa parking lot, and, like, my parents live down there, so I stop at that Wawa often, right? Like, the kids are hungry, whatever, I want to grab something, and I'm like, God forbid, like, my first thought was like, holy shit, he's gonna fucking kill somebody in that parking lot, you know what I mean? And I was like, I gotta, like, and this just kind of comes with, like, having kids, that's like your second nature to just auto think about them, and I'm like, dude, like, God forbid there's a kid, I mean, it would be a travesty if anybody got hurt, but I immediately thought of my own kids. I'm like, God fucking forbid if I was in that parking lot and that jerk-off came blowing through like that, I would go to jail for murder.
It's telltale sign of getting old, my friend, is when you start thinking about that stuff all the time.
Yeah, man.
Telltale sign.
All right, so let's talk about some shit.
That's interesting. That's a nice little way to kind of kick off your day.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, it was kind of mid-afternoon, but, you
get the point. I can see why you're coasting. I figured that'd be maybe a little more of an excuse to have a stiffer drink, but I guess still ain't no loss in your drinking clause. So you're following in the footsteps of this guy that decided to roar into the Wawa parking lot and get himself caught. Poor decision. I probably would have decided to maybe hit the Garden State Parkway right there. Since
he didn't get caught. He didn't get caught, dude. The cop was circling Wawa. I don't know where that dude went.
That's absurd.
Dude, I have absolutely no idea what happened. Now, coincidentally enough, and I won't go on too long about this because nobody has any fucking idea what we're talking about, but I was driving home at around like 6, this is probably at like, I don't know, call it like 3 o'clock, and around like 6:30 I'm driving home, and on the radio I heard there was police activity in Toms River, so I was like, I wonder if he hopped on the parkway, got off, blah, blah, blah.
Correlated to that, yeah. Huh.
In any event, that was my exciting afternoon before I did my wife's brakes.
Oh, I do not have a good segue from that into our topic tonight.
It's a little difficult. It's a bit of a
little difficult. I tried to think up a nice crafty way to do that, but
I'm gonna burp and mute the mic though.
That's fine by me. To our audience that decided to skip over that part tonight, we're heading to one of the most iconic landmarks in America, the Grand Canyon. And if you're on this episode, you're probably looking at the title and scratching your head, saying, what on earth could these two idiots be talking about regarding the Grand Canyon? Most of us two included here, know this as a breathtaking national park, a tourist hotspot, natural wonder. Today, we're going to try to peel back the layers on that a little bit and unearth some of the vast conspiracies surrounding this national chasm. So let's think about it for a moment.
Chasm, that's a good word.
Chasm. I try to mix up my verbiage every once in a while. I like to try to not use the same words all the time.
I'm a fan.
Grand Canyon isn't just a geological marvel, Mr. Phillips. It's a tapestry woven with the tales of lost civilizations, hidden artifacts, and some theories of some ancient aliens. Did you know that there are some claims of an ancient Egyptian city hidden somewhere in the Grand Canyon? And there are also some cave systems we're going to dive into that could potentially lead to some of the worlds unknown. And then the government's role. There's a couple different aspects of this that I want to hit on tonight. There's a lot of strict regulations around the exploration and excavation of certain areas of the Grand Canyon that we are clearly being kept in the dark on. And then there's also something I heard, and this kind of probably warrants its own episode in and of itself, but it's a conspiracy around the Smithsonian that whenever they tend to get involved, things shut down, get hidden away, or are shut off in terms of access to.
Yeah. Well, look at what happened to... it would really help when I start talking about things if I knew, like, people's names and shit, but I'm going to talk about this anyway, and I believe it's the Smithsonian. But there is a gentleman, and I can't remember his name. He's on Instagram. You guys can find him. It's the Boneyard, Alaska. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. Yep.
I believe, and we'll double check. I'm almost positive that it's the Smithsonian that this guy sent these mammoth tusks and all these different bones that he found in Alaska. And actually, it wasn't him. He actually wound up somehow owning the same property and or something in that regard. Much later on, after they were sent to the Smithsonian, and they just dumped a lot of that shit in the East River, dude, which is just wild.
It's very wild. It's very weird, and it is not the only story about it. I've heard like bits and pieces here and there, but it's starting to all tie together, and I don't think this will be the last time we hit on them.
Yeah, that's
to
an
our
interesting
audience,
piece.
Grab your favorite cocktail if you haven't already, as you well aware that we have. Sit back, let's embark on this journey to the heart of the Grand Canyon. We are your conspiracy realists. This is going to be another one of those episodes where we're going to kind of shoot from the hip and kind of talk about things that we're not too familiar of. Go on a little journey of discovery here with each of you. So let's dive into it. Where do you want to kind of kick this off?
All right, so let's start with my favorite, which is because I love ancient lost civilizations. Let's go with the Egyptian artifacts, baby. In fact, when we were talking about, hey, like, what do we want to talk about next? And you were like, oh, maybe the Grand Canyon. I was like, fuck yeah, let's go, Grand Canyon, baby.
You did. I gave you a couple options. You jumped all over the Grand Canyon, solely trying to link it back to ancient Egypt. So
the only thing that disappoints me is there's not a ton of evidence, but we'll talk about it.
Well, let's talk about it. Some context here. Grand Canyon is obviously very vast, very large, and I mean, there's a lot of accidents there, right? So the idea that the government is trying to keep people out, and the government, I'm not talking necessarily federal, I'm talking local as well here, primarily probably local. The idea that they're trying to keep people out really isn't that off-putting to me, only because of that exact reason. You know, you get some jerk off that's trying to take an Instagram photo, they topple over the side, and they go tumbling down, 1,000 feet to their death. Not
fuck
that
those people.
Yeah, but you know what? Those people then try to sue the state, or they cause issues.
Yeah, I know. I gotta fix my
understand.
German.
And then somebody's got to go clean that body up that's laying down at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. It's just gonna be sitting there. It's gonna stink. It's gonna get vultures. It's not exactly gonna be sightly to other tourists who are actually paying attention. So sometimes, I know we are the conspiracy realists. So in that, I like to try to take a realistic approach to a lot of things. And sometimes not everything is a conspiracy. Sometimes, unfortunately, there has to be rules in place to protect people from being stupid. Again, to your point, natural selection, but we are trying to be humane here. I get it.
Well, it's not just that, right? There are legitimate archaeological digs that go on there and things of that nature. And I know there's been a lot of indigenous American artifacts found in sites. So I get the conservation and preservation of those places. Some that are sacred. So I don't disagree that some parts are closed for good reason.
Right. So you mentioned some of the Native American tribes that have sort of taken foot in the Grand Canyon. There are quite a few of them, and I'm going to pull up a couple. The Hopi Indians, the Havasupai Indians. I'm probably going to butcher a couple of these names, so please bear with me. I apologize.
Yeah, sorry, every Native American
Halawapai. The Navajo and the Zuni are probably the most prominent of them.
You got a few of those, right?
Which ones did I get wrong?
I'm willing to bet one of them was wrong. The second one you said was just, I don't,
Havasupai.
I would have gotten it wrong too.
Yeah, I mean, the Hopi is pretty an easy one because I know that one.
Navajo is pretty easy, I know that.
Hualapi.
Listen, I think anybody that's going to be offended by us pronouncing those incorrectly probably isn't watching us anyway. If they've watched us in the past, then they know what we're about, so fuck them.
I like to always expand our demographic out there, so... in any case, all the different Indian tribes, one of the most common aspects of what they have to say is that the Grand Canyon presents some level of spiritual significance to them. And it's not just the Grand Canyon. You tend to see this pattern in any sort of natural landmark, or natural or unnatural landmark, cave structure, or any sort of place kind of draws intrigue by people. The Indians, the Native Americans that have grown their whole lives there, had tribal history there, they always seem to link this back to something spiritual, whether it's the first people that walked the earth, sometimes you'll hear it's related to aliens, and sometimes you'll hear it's related to ancient civilizations. And so that's what we're going to kind of start with here, is the ancient Egyptian theory. There is a story. There are many stories, but one of the stories that I kind of grabbed hold of, and I actually kind of really enjoyed, was the story of, oh gosh, I'm trying to look for his name. It was
G.E. Kincaid.
G.E. Kincaid, yes, you nailed it.
So he was the archaeologist that supposedly found, and he didn't necessarily say, oh, I found ancient Egyptian ruins. It was ancient Egyptian-like. So it was saying that, hey, I found artifacts that are very similar to what you would find in ancient Egypt, or what they're I guess, and this was a long time ago. This is the early 1900s, so they were probably still unearthing a lot of that stuff.
You're recalling this stuff. I love it. It's amazing. You took everything out of my mouth right there. I can't even get it out today. No, that's perfect, because I'm glad you're on top of this, because some of this stuff I have written down. Some of it I just heard some other podcasts, or I was researching it. 1909 was the first article that appeared in the Arizona Gazette by G. Kincaid. There's conflicting stories about G. Kincaid and who he worked for. Some say he was just an explorer on his own accord, just traveling the Grand Canyon looking for cool things. Others have suggested that he worked directly for the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian ties in either story because in the first story, the former story, he does this exploration and tells the Smithsonian about his findings, and they shut it down. In the latter story, he is actually working for the Smithsonian Institute. In any case, he discovers a series of tunnels and chambers in a very remote part of the Grand Canyon, and these caves were suggested to contain artifacts that connected to ancient Egypt or Tibetan cultures. The caves were described as being large and intricately designed with various passageways leading through different chambers. He obviously is climbing down these things. He's an explorer now. Within these chambers, Kincaid reports to find statues, hieroglyphics, copper tools, and other artifacts that are not consistent with Native American cultures that were in the area. All those tribes I just named. Now, some of the most sensational claims of the discovery include the discovery of mummies, golden artifacts, and tablets inscribed with the hieroglyphics. These items were said to be evidence of an advanced and unknown civilization that presumably inhabited that region. The article also claimed that the Smithsonian Institute was involved in the investigation at some point. Again, differing opinions. I do know, that, and I don't remember the name of the guy, but the host of the Y-File, I think, tried to pull that article up using microfiche and some old research, and could confirm the article exists. Yeah. Of course, when you talk to the Smithsonian, and you can call them and ask, and it's not the first time they've been asked, they have consistently denied any knowledge of Kincaid, says he was never a person, or any knowledge of the cave. Similarly, no evidence has ever been produced to support the existence of such a discovery. Right. So, that brings us to today. The story of G. Kincaid is now, depending on the circle you're in, either regarded as a myth or just an ongoing conspiracy. And that's where we are. We are your conspiracy theorists. Conspiracy realists, but theorists as well.
We're pattern recognionists. I like that
pattern recognionists.
Yeah, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a pattern recognitionist.
Going back to some of the Native Americans, and I wanted to bring those up early on because oftentimes we tend to dismiss the perspective of those ancient people who sort of inhabited these lands before we as Europeans effectively came in, took over, and become your modern Americans. These tribes built their entire cultures around the areas in which they inhabited. So when you talk about the Navajo Indians, or you talk about the Hopi Indians that were growing up in these tribes within the Grand Canyon or neighboring areas, and they're moving from generation to generation, they're passing on stories. Right. As irony would have it, I told a similar story this morning. I was doing another podcast as a guest to promote our old channel right here, actually on Shakespeare. That episode kind of brought us in there. And we started talking about storytelling and obviously Shakespeare's stories and the patterns it's today. If you haven't checked out that episode, please go back and do that. But also about stories like the Bible. And this will be another one we'll kind of lean into a little bit here as well in the Grand Canyon. In every story that I think you and I, Tim, have kind of explored, there's myth, of course. It's the old game of telephone. Like, you tell somebody a story, and they tell it, and they embellish it a little bit, and they embellish a little bit, and they change one thing. But at the core of it, there's always some degree of truth. And a lot of these Indian tribes have always talked about there being something happening in all of these locales. So, sticking to the Grand Canyon, there are accounts from these tribes that suggest that the ancient peoples lived in the Grand Canyon, and that's why it's a spiritual relic. Right. So to hear a story like G. Kincaid, where he's saying the Grand Canyon is vast, and I don't think people quite realize, because you see it on paper or you hear about it, and maybe you look down at a map, you don't realize like the scale of what this canyon actually is.
Yeah, not only just how wide it is, but how long it is. Like it's
how
tremendous,
long.
Dude.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Like it covers a lot of ground.
Right. It's really quite remarkable. So to suggest that there might be hidden caves, hidden areas within the Grand Canyon, to me, doesn't really sound that far-fetched.
No, not at all.
Are they a network of them? Don't know.
Yeah.
But it's plausible, right?
Yeah, 100%. Listen, archaeologists have also found... So, yes, we certainly know that there were different Native American tribes that inhabited those areas, but they've also found artifacts of the Clovis people living in that area, too. There have been Clovis points, right, which are paleo. These go back to, older than 12,000 years, or right around 12,000 years. So we know that people inhabited that area. And when you mentioned that some of the Native American tribes had stories about more ancient people living in that area, my mind goes to, well, at some point in time, did they encounter the Clovis people? Right? And were the Clovis people those ancient people that they were talking about? And were they utilizing the Grand Canyon as essentially a home, if you will? Right? Could that potentially have been it? And what I also find very interesting, and I don't want to get too far off topic yet, but I don't know if you caught it, but I used the number 12,000 years ago. What happened about 12,000 years ago?
You're leaning into it. So let's hold on to that thought, because I wanted to go there too, and which is why I sort of nudged in the biblical stories a little bit there. Going back to the Grand Canyon here, we love our screen shares, so we're going to go ahead and pull up our little browser over here just to give you guys a little bit of perspective on what we're talking here. So I pulled up just a simple Google Maps. Any of you guys can do this. Just type in Grand Canyon. You can see what it looks like. This is Grand Canyon National Park, right? I'm going to zoom in now. And so you can see how I was zoomed out. And if you keep zooming in, you can see that Colorado River. And look how many times I've zoomed in before I actually get to what the river is. Everyone knows how Google Maps works. So when you scroll all the way in, this is effectively seeing a house right here, right? If you're doing this on Street View. You saw how many times I zoomed in. So just imagine your house is on one of these sides right here. So the river's, it's not the biggest river in the world. You can obviously see across it. You can probably swim across it fairly easily, but it's still a pretty substantial river. But now I'm going to zoom out. And I'm going to keep zooming out. And this is the view I was at before. But this is just a fraction of what the Grand Canyon is. You can see this splintering all the way through. And it's vast. Look at how vast that is, right? It does actually, doesn't it? So the idea, of course, very big remnants of a river right there. It's pretty wild. It kind of looks like a vein, right?
It does actually look like veins, doesn't it?
Weird how rivers work. To make a suggestion to me that there's not, exactly what's in every crevice of this area. Because as I zoom in, you can see different layers. Like there's a flat layer right here. There's a flat layer here, flat here, flat here, flat here, flat up here. And then it goes in and out all over the place. To suggest that there's nothing hidden or cavernous in any of this that would be suspicious is a little bit of a bold claim, just because we really haven't had the capacity to research this stuff at any great detail for that long. I mean, if you think about the 1900s, when this guy was apparently out there, this guy Kincaid was apparently out there looking through this stuff, the guy's probably walking around with a walking stick. It's not like he has a digital camera that he's out there being able to take photos of. So to suggest he couldn't take pictures of the cave, couldn't produce any evidence, again, isn't that off-putting to me?
Yeah.
Tales need to be told, and tales will always be told. And it's certainly plausible that the Arizona Gazette made up this story to sell newspapers. But we're talking about the Arizona Gazette, too. We're not talking about a national paper or any sort of a syndicated news network that was trying to pitch a story. It's a relatively small town paper in the grand scheme of things right here. Guy finds these caverns and immediately goes to the Smithsonian. And that's the story I largely buy into, who then comes out to explore them, and the entire thing is shut down. Now, why is that important? You talked about before, the Smithsonian took the guy from Boneyard, Alaska, and dumped his dinosaur bones that he straight up found, and just dumped them in the river. It's not the first time that this happened.
No.
Not the first time. They have a documented history of basically taking fossils that they found and dumping them in the river, so much so that people will go and scour the river and get old dinosaur teeth or old shark teeth. It's like a hobby for people in that area.
There's this guy
on eBay.
Yeah, there's this guy. His name is Dirty Water Don, I believe his name is. who
Quite the
regularly
name.
dives in the East River. Very apropos if you're diving in the East River. That's some dirty-ass water. And he has pulled out, like, massive bones from all different kinds of different animals that were dumped there by the Smithsonian. So we know it's a fact. People are finding this shit.
They're finding it, for sure. The actual evidence of tying things to ancient Egypt. I think if you look up this story about G.E. Kincaid, or you look up the story about ancient Egypt artifacts in the Grand Canyon, you will find a Discovery Channel article that debunks it. Every other place on the internet that I found that debunks this, and I use that in quotes here, leads back to that one singular Discovery Channel article.
Yes.
Now, I don't know this for fact, but I'm going to type it in my little search engine here. Are Discovery and Smithsonian Channel owned by the same company? I have to like lean over to see around my microphone here. Okay, they are not. They're part of a media. Oh no, they are part of a media conglomerate. Discovery is owned by Warner Bros. Discovery. Smithsonian is basically Paramount. All right, so they're separate companies. All right, they do have content collaboration and partnerships, though. Okay, that kind of dispels my theory right there. But
yeah, but do any of them have anything to do? So, like the Smithsonian Channel, right? Does that have anything to do with the actual museum? I know it's called the Smithsonian Channel.
I mean, presumably yes, because they're going to be owned by the same person for the naming rights.
One would guess.
What I was sort of getting at there is it just struck me as odd that one article, there's one singular article on the internet that everyone seems to be going back to. And it's Discovery Science, really, not Discovery
It's not even
Channel.
a great article. Like, if anybody could read the article, they don't do a very good job of really debunking it, in my opinion. Like, they don't utilize a lot of facts to actually debunk this story. Which, again...
They effectively...
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it could all be bullshit, right? I mean, it's very plausible
right.
that the whole G.E. Kincaid story from top to bottom is completely bullshit and holds no water at all. I don't think they did a very good job of debunking it, though.
Completely plausible.
Yeah.
To your point, they debunk it largely by saying that there's no evidence that there were ancient Egyptian artifacts there, and of course there wouldn't be, and so forth. But that I don't think is the point. We have seen, in looking at all sorts of ancient cultures, ancient architecture around the world, we've seen similarities to ancient Egyptian culture everywhere. And we use ancient Egypt because it's the most popular, right? But if you go down to the Mayans or the Nazca lines or anywhere else in the world, I mean, you can go to China and see pyramids that are built that are very similar to the ones in Giza. A lot of the symbolism is similar. It's not exact, it's similar. Right. And the only place that we've never really, quote unquote, found anything is really the United States, North America. They're all over South America. They're all over Asia. They're all over Europe. They're not here. They're in Africa. Like, they're not here. So to me, did North America just pop up overnight? It's always baffled me that we had never had anything at home here that we can kind of claim our own. That it just pop up overnight. And all these other places where you actually know that they exist, what's the common thread? Mm-hmm. We're all shithole countries. They're third world countries that don't have much going on. So it's very easy for people to find it because it's sort of an open game, right?
Right.
But that's why when you look at like the UK, or you look at the United States or Spain or France or Germany, you really don't hear a lot about like the hidden architecture, the ancient cultures that are going on there. The countries probably have that a lot better wraps. So when I look at this G.E. Kincaid situation, if this guy does stumble upon a series of caves, we talked about Göbekli Tepe not too long ago and what happened there. People got involved, the World Economic Forum, in that particular situation, they try to mask it up as fast as they can. It's happening everywhere, even in ancient Egypt, where we talked about that in our pyramids episode. You can go in there and you can answer every single question you have about ancient Egypt. Crack open that tomb, pour some sediment down each of the tunnels, walk inside there, and they don't.
Yep.
Why? You want me to believe that nobody's ever done that? Nobody's ever went down to the deepest, darkest cavern? I have a hard time believing that. And again, this is effectively a third world country in Egypt that's littered with corruption. Give me a break. And so in thinking about that Kincaid story and then likening it back to the Native American tribes, we find something there, I mean, we know for goddamn sure that we have no problem lifting up those Native Americans and moving them somewhere else. We've done it. We continue to do it. This guy happens to stumble across an ancient city. The government is shutting that down. And no questions asked, you'll never hear about it again, especially at a time where, is there no evidence? Well, of course there's no evidence because the technology doesn't exist. But if they find that today, you can't contain that evidence now.
Yeah, this guy wasn't going live on X and going, holy shit, guys, look what I just found, right? This was 1909 we're talking about. I mean, it was quite literally a different world. I think that's a really good point, right? It's one of those things that I think by the end of this conversation, where I think we're probably likely going to leave open and say that it's plausible, because there's really no way to prove that it didn't occur, right? You can't prove that it did, but you also can't prove that it didn't. Mm-hmm. Especially if you subscribe to the theory that, ancient transoceanic traveling actually took place, which I personally do. Largely in part of what you just mentioned, right? There are so many similarities throughout the world. I just find it hard to believe that people weren't traveling much greater distances with ease than we're led to believe. So if that's the case, then of course, why wouldn't there be some ruins or artifacts found from some civilization that we never imagined would actually be in that location?
Yeah. I want to move away from maybe not that ancient civilization, but into a different ancient civilization. There is, and let me see if I can pull up any imagery of it. Okay. See, I don't know if these pictures are actually real. A lot of them are kind of spoofed here a little bit, so I don't know that I want to pull them up, but maybe I will.
We'll take a peek. Well, that's the disclaimer, guys. We have no idea if this is real.
Yeah, absolutely no idea if it's real. So you can see... what is that? Oh, that's from a YouTube video. I don't want to pull that. There's also speculation. Okay. Here we go. I got a couple of images right here. Actually, I must just pull this whole Google image search. Let me pull this whole thing up for you guys. Yeah, might as well. All right. So I just kind of looked up. I was looking up something completely different, and now all these images came up, which I guess kind of works pretty well. It's a decent enough segue to where we're going here. All right, so what I was actually going to look up is giants in the Grand Canyon, because there was a lot of speculation about that. I've never been a giants guy. I've never really been into that. I've never really bought into that. Just the New York football Giants. Yeah, for sure. LFG. Big season ahead of us. But that theme continues to come up over and over again, that an ancient peoples could have been giants. And in fact, there's some speculation that dinosaurs might not have existed, or they did exist and they coexisted with giants, bigger human beings, everyone downsized over periods of time and so forth. There's speculation that old bones have potentially been found. I don't know much beyond that or about that, but I thought that was an interesting theory. And as you look now at some of the photos that I brought up here, this happens to be a real photo, which everyone's tying it to like an ancient citadel or something like that. Can I click on it? I hate when they give you these itsy bitsy photos and you can't click.
I know, it's annoying as shit.
Yeah, really, really quite frustrating. You can see a photo there. Here's another photo. Oh, no, it's the exact same one. Here's another version of it right there. So you can see these cavern entrances in there. But what you can also see, and this is largely from water erosion, but it does look like it's a series of steps up that go in there. Is this one going to come in a little bit bigger? We're going to find out. No, this is some weird website.
You know what's interesting about that photo, right? If that's the entrance, let's say we're speculating now, right? Let's say that that's man-made, okay? We're talking about cultures that didn't have the technology that we have today, right? Not even remotely close. And so think about the amount of work that it would take to carve out something like that. Why would you make it that fucking big? Right. Like, why would you make it that big? It doesn't make any sense to me, right? Like, if you were gonna go, let's say you go out into the woods tomorrow and you build yourself a shelter. Are you gonna build I can't tell. I'm making up a number here, but are you gonna build a 25 foot tall entrance to your shelter? No, it would make absolutely no sense. I mean, you're you would build an entrance large enough for you to fit through, and that's it. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
No, makes no sense.
Granted, that does not prove that there were giants at all in the slightest bit, but I do find it a little interesting.
It's an interesting theory. I just wanted to cover it because say we were covering it, but I mean, you can see right here. This is the Nanko Suite ruins. There's again, like more evidence of people being able to get in there. Now, depending on what you want to believe on how the Grand Canyon was formed, that's an awfully hard spot to get to, and it's awfully steep drop off of there, which makes that aspect a little bit interesting. But these are actual caverns that are going inside, which again, the structure of that, the formation of that, these are effectively perfect rectangles that look like you're building into the pieces here. An underground city of giants. Okay, so here's some of the statues that supposedly exist.
Is that apparently supposed to be in the Grand Canyon?
Yeah, see, none of these things on Pinterest ever let me actually open it up.
Yeah,
some people are suggesting that it's clickbait and whatnot, but I've seen evidence, and I'm just going to close out of my browser here for now.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of discussion that there's been skeletal remains. Again, they could be dinosaurs, they could be anything else. They don't necessarily align to anything. And there's artifacts that are likened to those giants. There's a lot of monuments and statues that fall into line with those artifacts that have been allegedly found. Much like anything conspiracy, it's very difficult to get a hold on it until you kind of go to the depths of the internet, and then you have to always bring into question, as we've done many times here, what is true and what is not. The Native American tribes, if we go back to that again, do have myths about giant beings, and that is who occupied the space as some of the early creators. Some of them, again, are looked at as gods. Some of it could have been perception too. Sometimes, have you ever heard the old trope? Oh my God, like you see a celebrity in person, they're much smaller than you thought, right?
Yeah, dude. I saw Joe Rogan once. I was like, holy shit, he's my size.
Right, he's a tiny little guy.
Actually, he might be a little bit shorter than me, and I'm not a big dude.
Right. So like sometimes it's really just the stuff of legends where like when you put somebody on a pedestal, no matter who they are, no matter what that looks like, they always seem a lot bigger or a lot more pronounced than they really are. And so I'm not going to leave that out for speculation there as well.
But you brought up a really good point earlier, right? Like people don't just make some people make things up 100%, right? And some things are completely false and they're done for entertainment, or there are writers that write novels and screenplays and plays and so on and so forth, and they're making everything up, right? We know that that's the case, but people don't just sit around with their thumb up their ass all day thinking, let me just make up some bullshit story for no reason at all whatsoever, right? Like a good example, I have younger kids, right? They're close to the age of yours. And I was telling my girls how Jaws was a true story, right? And happened right here in New Jersey. And they were like, what? Like, they were blown away, right? So, like, it's a fantastic movie, greatly exaggerated, but there's a grain of truth in there, right? That actually happened. There was what they believed to be a single shark that was responsible for killing multiple people in one body of water during a very short period of time. Right, so there's a grain of truth in there somewhere. So look, do I necessarily think that there were giants roaming the earth? Probably not. That's maybe not one that I really hold on to that strongly. Likely because I haven't seen any true evidence of it. But people don't usually just make shit up for no reason, man.
The episode that's going to come out after this one, we're going to talk about Ong's hat, and you talk about a grain of truth being sort of the foundation for weaving a larger story. That's a great one. If you guys all get a chance to check that out. Yeah.
Nice promo.
I often, see that? We're trying to really tie these things in. We're getting a little better with that. I often think, and I think we've talked about this on just about every episode now, is that sometimes people latch on to an idea and their perception of that idea is grander than the reality of it. So when you say giants, that doesn't necessarily mean that we had 20-foot tall massive beings where we're barely going up to their knee or their ankle or anything like that.
Right.
A giant could quite honestly be like Andre the Giant, who is 8 feet tall. And there's plenty of people in pro wrestling now that match that thing. Like the Undertaker, 7 feet tall. That doesn't seem like a lot to us because we're familiar of it, and especially when you see it on TV, it seems very small. But I always tell a story about when I went to a pro wrestling event in Atlantic City. It was like a house show or something like that. We had gotten free tickets, so we were really close. We were like the first row, second row, something like that. And I remember during an intermission, we get right up to the guardrail as the next match is coming out. At the time, the Hardy Boys were really popular, and so my brother and I were hanging over the guardrail. We were younger. I mean, I was definitely not driving age. Probably was, call it 14, 13, somewhere in that range. Maybe 15. Yeah, I guess 15 at the tops. In any case, I'm relatively young, but I'm not super small. I'm not maybe fully grown at that point either. Hardy Boys, for those that are wrestling fans, or for those that are not wrestling fans, were like a smaller tag team, average height maybe in professional wrestling terms. Hardy Boys walk out and they're huge, and you see them on television and they're smaller comparative to the other wrestlers, but they're also like 6'2", 6'3" human beings. To an average person, they're gigantic, right?
Right.
So I see them. Well, the next guy that comes out is Kane, who is 7 feet tall. Glenn Jacobs, he's now the mayor of Knox County in Tennessee.
He's a mayor?
He is the mayor of Knox
Shut
County.
the fuck up. I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. He is, it's the most remarkable career shift I've ever seen. He's a Republican mayor, huge advocate of Donald Trump. There was talks that he could even be a VP candidate.
Let's fucking go Kane.
Yeah. Scariest motherfucker on earth, but so nice and humble. So he walks out, and I don't think, I was young, again, not that young, but I don't think you realize what fear is until you see a 7-foot man walking down a ramp, which is slightly elevated with fire going off in the background. And you're just like bending your neck, looking up, and it's like, I have never seen a man of this size. And like, we're not talking about like a fat bastard either. This guy is rock solid muscle, and he's 7 feet tall, probably 300 pounds. This is a giant human being.
Yeah.
And so sometimes my interpretation of what we might hear of these giants in the past doesn't have to be 25 feet tall. It could be 7 or 8 feet tall. He's not the tallest person in wrestling, let alone the tallest people. I mean, Andre the Giant was almost 8 feet tall. The Undertaker was over 7 feet. Paul White, the Big Show, was 7'3" or something in that range. Actually, I think Kane was more like 6'10", but nevertheless, like these are all
a big
massive.
fucking dude. Yeah.
Right. These are massive human beings. And I don't think it's out of the question to say that there might have been a lineage of those types of people. It might have just been, maybe there's a small sect of those people at some point. Maybe it was an entire civilization or culture, and like that DNA is being passed down, and it's just been sort of mixed in with like your average Joe Schmo. But if you had an average sized person, especially at that era where, your average Native American people, they're probably in that like 5'5" or smaller range.
Right.
Particularly when you date back years, humans were a little smaller. Humans have gotten progressively bigger. So if you have a couple of these people that are now 7 feet tall, or even 6.5 feet tall, they're giants, comparatively speaking. So I often wonder if it's just a misconception, maybe, to talk about giants, and that's really now. It doesn't explain why you'd have that giant wall, but I think that. Actually, here's a freaking great look into the middle I just found right here. I don't know that explains it, but I also don't know that it's all man-formed either. There could be a combination of natural formations that you sort of bust into, and maybe you make something more out of it than really was there.
Yeah.
Or it could just be, humans were notorious for being a little gratuitous in everything we do, right? Why do we need these massive scale buildings? Why do people need these huge houses and stuff? Sometimes you just do it because you can.
You wanna? You're bored? Who knows?
Let me show you the inside of this.
They had
I don't know, man. It's not like they had an Xbox to jump on every single night and go pubbing. Here's another look of one of those holes right there, kind of jumping into that. Kind of an interesting little look into what that cavern looks like. And if you were wondering, it does look like it's actually accessible. You can go in there. Whatever this Alamy thing is popping up a lot of photos. It does. I can't really tell what that is in the back, but you see how it's kind of like, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. It's kind of got like lines through it back there. I was going to say
it looks textured.
Yeah, it looks very textured, or some sort of like shelving or something like that. Obviously not shelving, but it actually makes that Egyptian one with the giant statues look a little bit more real in there, or a little bit more plausible. I don't know. There's a lot of different cavern stuff in there. The other thing I want to kind of bring up on that too is, this isn't the first known history of civilizations being in mountains. We have a ton of them over in, what was the other one you're talking about? It's not Göbekli Tepe. There was another ancient civilization. There's an underground city.
There's one in Turkey. I can't tell you the name of it off the top of my head, but there are caverns, like deep. I'm talking fucking deep under the earth that people lived in. I'm 99.9% sure it's also in Turkey.
And almost, I am too. I think there's a lot out there.
I believe Graham
it's
Hancock,
like an underground bunker.
Yeah, I think Graham Hancock covered it in Ancient Apocalypse. I believe there was an episode where he was there.
Now I had heard about that previous to that too.
Yeah,
it was probably one of the deepest dives I'd ever seen on that.
Yeah, but point being, like human beings are capable of magnificent feats, right? I mean, it's wild.
We often, I think, I don't want to say underappreciate, but I think we often just sort of downplay what some of these old ancient civilizations were able to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of these other images I'm looking at got to be a little bit fake. They're definitely not real. That's for sure. Yeah, so some of them are like skeletons and people looking at it. I don't think that's real.
No.
But even here in the United States, in the Ozark Mountains, there is a massive complex within the Ozark Mountains of basically black hat bunkers.
Yeah.
Jesse Ventura, in his show, I think it was just called Conspiracy Theories. I think we covered this once before.
Don't we know somebody by the Ozarks?
We do.
We should send him searching for us next time he's not driving inmates from state to state.
The Ozarks are a pretty big mountain range, but that's not a bad. Maybe we'll go out there and visit, actually, and we can go check it out. But he did try to go in there, and again, he is a former governor of the state of Minnesota, and his clearance was not allowed to go in there. But he got in. I mean, like you go into basically a big cave, not just dissimilar to the opening you just saw there, and I mean, it is like a road and like bunker steel doors. Like there's something going on in there. Maybe it's a DARPA initiative. Maybe it's like the government's like, in case of emergency break glass thing. But it is there's a history of that throughout the world from our civilization and from civilizations before that we've sort of assumed. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that something exists there. And perhaps that's why you can't really go down there into the Grand Canyon and search around, because they're worried about what you're going to see.
Look, I think that without a shadow of a doubt, there were cultures in the past, whether it be recent past or ancient history, that certainly utilized the Grand Canyon and any caverns or caves within it as dwellings. It only makes sense. Whether it had been some sort of natural cave that they found and then potentially expanded on it, whatever it might be, I don't think there's, like I said, there's no shadow of a doubt that they utilized that stuff. Does that mean that the Egyptians were there? Or whatever civilization lived in Egypt pre-dynastic Egyptians? Not necessarily. It's a fun story. I'd like to believe it. I love the idea of lost civilization. So I trust me, I want to fucking believe that. I do.
Yeah.
I don't because there's no... I shouldn't say I don't. There's reason to pause because there... Right. There's reason to pause because there has been no actual evidence, with the exception of the Kincaid story. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's like subjective evidence that some people have said people in the area have went down there. They've tried to find their own caverns. They think there's more there. Yeah. You never really know what to believe because you're not allowed to go back half the time, or they say you can't go back, so you can never really dive into it. There is something else that had come up in some of my research, and it's not something we're going to totally cover tonight, but it's something that you and I have talked about covering in the future, that the whole idea of like these caves and caverns and like these tunnel systems, some of it's even been linked to the Hollow Earth theory, where the long and short of the Hollow Earth is that there is this underground civilization. Some people call them reptilians. Some people just call them other alien types. But basically, there's this other civilization.
I call them Hillary Clintons.
The Hillary Clintons. One of them, and I tried to just look in my notes here. I did not write it down for some reason. One of the big entry points that are theorized is actually over in California. It's a mountain range that's often linked to a lot of different extraterrestrial sightings. And so the Grand Canyon is the same thing. You get a lot of extraterrestrial sightings that are said to be going on there. A lot of UFO sightings and stuff like that. I mean, that's out in like the desert area, right? So like you got Arizona. People are seeing stuff all the time over there. You got Area 51 that's not, it's a stone's throw away, right? You got Vegas, stone's throw away from a lot of these places. And in fact, it's one of the, if you're ever out in that area, you go Vegas, Canyon, and then go to the little alien to hit Roswell. It's like one of the big trips that are out there. Yeah. Along whatever that highway is, I can't remember. Is it 66, Route 66 maybe?
Could be.
I know. I think I'm only saying it because it's the clothing brand. I think they named it
we'll call it that.
We'll call it that. But that's the other thing that's kind of fascinated me too, and maybe my curiosity would love to like go on some sort of tour down there, but I'm also kind of paranoid that I'm gonna go down into one of these caverns and get completely fucking lost.
Dude,
and,
caves
never
scare the
coming out.
fuck out of me. You know why? Bats. I just realized I got my backup claw sitting in camera view over here. Dude, and it's not that I'm afraid of bats. I'm afraid of bat shit. Okay? I'm afraid...
Why?
I see your face. Dude, because that's how people get, like, fucking Ebola and all these wacky-ass diseases and crash and bleed out, man.
Okay,
Dude,
COVID-19. Yeah.
Dude, I swear to God, there have been stories of, like, of researchers... by the way, I'm adding absolutely zero zero evidence, but I'm telling you, I've heard stories of researchers that were standing outside of a cave, and there was this massive swarm of bats that came out, and what happened? They shit all over these people, and they contracted some kind of rare disease, or bacteria, whatever it might be.
It's certainly not out of the question. If you get shit on by any animal, you have the risk of
point being,
it's shit. That's why waste from your body.
That's why caves scare me. The fucking bats.
I mean, that certainly wasn't something on the top of my agenda. That is actually something I've heard about the Grand Canyon and why they tell people to stay away from there because they don't want to disturb the bat population and send them outwards. Yeah. I largely think that's bullshit. I guess that is a worry. It's not something that was on the top of my list.
How many people are really
lost, man?
Yeah,
you ain't getting a GPS on the way out of there. You know.
No, I agree.
You go down the wrong tube. You know where to get out.
What I want to know, though, right, is that. And I get it, it's a catch-22, because if you allow people to go in there, then more people might go in there, and then it can be a disturbance, so I do understand that. But the point that I was just going to make before I went off on this rant was that, yes, it's one of the most popular tourist destinations in America, the Grand Canyon, but it's fucking tremendous, right? Like, I'm willing to bet, and I've never been there, this is completely anecdotal, but I'm willing to bet that there are areas in the Grand Canyon that you can go to and probably not see another person for fucking miles, because it's just that vast. So, like... I don't know, man. Like, is it really that big of a fucking deal if you let a few people just kind of walk around there? Like, I know it's a popular tourist area, but are people flocking to the Grand Canyon like they are a water park? No, it's not the same thing.
I think they are, though. Like, if you go to the Grand Canyon, like, viewing posts, it's always going to be populated. And I think there are also people that are touring down there. They're going on their own expeditions because you obviously can't police the entire thing. You could do whatever you want.
No.
There's only really certain sections that are completely cut off and isolated where like it's black ops. You try to go in there, you're going to get a black helicopter circling around, which there have been stories of that happening.
Dude, you know what? Can you... my bad, I didn't mean to cut you off. Can you...
No, go ahead.
I don't expect you to know the answer to this. This is more hypothetical, but can you actually go on like a rafting trip down the Colorado River? I'm gonna Google that. Good. You do you. I'm gonna Google that.
I was gonna Google it too. Yeah, you Google it.
Well, the reason why
my prediction is yes.
Well, the reason why I brought that up, if you're allowed to raft down the Colorado River, which encompasses the entire Grand Canyon, then what fucking parts are you not allowed to go in?
I don't think you're going to be able to go the entirety of the Colorado River, though. I feel like you're going to have an entry point and exit point, and they're going to they're going to put you through a small little spot. You know, you're never rafting down an entire river. It's always just a segment of it, unless it's a really small river. What was I going to say? So to the adventuring standpoint, I don't know if we brought it up on here, or at least on a live show, but I know you and I've talked about it. There was an old story about Forrest Fenn. And Forrest Fenn was an old author. Oh, I say old; he's passed away now. But
we talked about Forrest Fenn.
Was it on an episode though, or was it?
It was. It has not been released yet. It was. This was. That was also. I think we talked about it. Ong's Hat. We didn't go into like great detail about it, but we did. Okay. You know, put it this way: it's worth bringing up again. Go ahead.
So you're going to hear this when you tune in next week, because you're definitely going to tune in to listen to that one. Ong's Hat with Joseph Matheny. So. The whole premise of Forrest Fenn's Trevor is he hid a box of treasure in the Colorado Rockies. And then he wrote a poem that gave the treasure's location, but it was fairly ambiguous. And of course, the Rockies are a very, very vast place. And his purpose was to get people out in nature, to do more exploration, to go on family walks and tours and so forth. And he always said within the poem that, you know, when he started talking about it, he released it and stuff. He told people, I don't remember what age he was at the time, but let's say 60. I'm a 60-year-old man that rented a truck and brought this 50-pound box in one trip to bury it. Take that as you may, but clearly I wasn't going overboard on where I'm hiding this thing. It's very, if you follow all the clues, which of course we're in poems, so you have to really like use different meanings for words and stuff.
Yeah, they're like riddles almost.
There's a riddle, yeah. But it's like, take that as you may, but you're not going to have to look very hard. Just follow the clues. If you can figure out the clues, you'll figure out where to go. In any case, part of the reason that he really wanted to get it done is because people started dying from it. Because they go on these expeditions, they'd get lost, they'd go down rapids, and they'd make more of it than necessary. And he was coming under a lot of fire for that because, did you make this whole thing up? You're letting people die. People are getting obsessed with this stuff. And I think that's probably the same thing with the Grand Canyon. Like, sometimes you have to police people so they don't be stupid and kill themselves.
Yeah.
I think if you opened it up to everybody, though, and you got everybody going in there and you let somebody talk about how they found this ancient ruins and stuff, you're going to get a lot of people that are going to get nasty and they're going to try to go in there and and it happens today. You have people that go on expeditions and get lost. We were talking about the Instagram people too that like literally fall off the freaking side of the mountain. Some get stuck, some break a bone, some die. Yeah. People are stupid and they do a lot for clout. This is social media era, so you're going to get people that are recording. Maybe they're recording a podcast, much like these two idiots you're listening to right now. But they want to go and be ridiculous, or they want to go and for some reason people love to like graffiti crap and ruin it for likes. I never understood that, but I think that might lean into it too. So. Yeah, I never understood the premise of that. It just seems weird and dumb to me, but
I was a douchebag.
I guess whatever floats your boats. Yeah. You saw an ancient civilization at that age, you're going to go and fucking spray paint it?
No, of course not. No. I'm just saying in general. Yeah, but here's my counter argument to that, right? So people are dumb, people are going to die on these expeditions, right? Dude, you can go climb Mount Everest tomorrow, okay? One of the most dangerous mountains on the face of the planet, right? People die climbing Mount Everest every year, right? You're allowed to do it. Why can't I go fucking explore the Grand Canyon?
But you're not allowed to climb Mount Everest on your own will. You still have to follow certain paths that are designed there. Once you get to a certain point, you can obviously do whatever the hell you want. You can't just like go up this one random side of the mountain and go. Like they're gonna stop you. They're gonna send you up. They're gonna. The idea is to guide you to the path of least resistance, right? It's too big to police the Grand Canyon, so I guess you could do whatever the hell you want, except if you go in the the tented areas or the really off limit areas. You can really do whatever you want. It's just I think the premise is it's an obligation for humanity to try to prevent people from killing themselves because honestly they can't not do it themselves. They're dumb. People are dumb. It's telling a child to not touch a hot stove. Until they do it, they're not going to realize what the repercussion is. Well, some people think that hanging off the side of the Grand Canyon to take a picture is a great idea. Until they
let those people die. Let those people die. I don't care. Die. I hope you die. Actually, if you want to fucking hang off the side of the Grand Canyon, I hope you fucking fall and die because you're dumb. I will get out. Get out. No, I don't want you to do it. Listen, I don't want anybody to do that. But you're fucking stupid. You're dumb. You deserve it.
That's fair.
Get out. Get right out.
So. We're nearing the bottoms of our drinks here, and I want to kind of circle back to something you had mentioned earlier. The canyon formation. Common knowledge, what you're taught is it's really the Colorado River. Over millions of years, the river has sort of worn down and cut through layers of rocks and gradually carved down the canyon. So they're saying that geological evidence of the river began eroding about 5 to 6 million years ago, some of it being much longer. There's sedimentary layers that suggest that different limestone and sandstone and shale were laid down over hundreds of millions of years, and that's sort of set in what the sediment layers are right now, and that's really what you're paying attention to. The water erosion features, characterized by features such as steep walls, V-shaped valleys, side canyons, again, indicative of all water erosions. And the presence of rapids and waterfalls along the Colorado River also points to ongoing erosion processes. Now, there is also a theory, and we go back to that biblical story of the Great Flood. And what you mentioned earlier, the Younger Dryas, which happened 12,000 years ago. This was a little bit of a surprise to me to see this, and it adds up because some of the makings of, I guess, the geography of the Grand Canyon, when you have a steep drop like that, that doesn't necessarily, to me, I'm not a geologist. I'm not an expert in this field, but something that happens over 5 to 6 million years. Some of it looks very sharp and very direct. And so there is a theory that those that believe into the Great Flood associate that the Grand Canyon was formed rapidly by a massive flood that would be linked to the same Noah's Ark story, and that a cataclysmic event involving large volumes of water carved out that canyon in a very, very short period of time. Younger Dryas comes up in everything we're talking about now.
Yeah. One of my favorite researchers, Randall Carlson, popularized, I don't know if he necessarily popularized it to me, that the Grand Canyon was potentially formed during the Younger Dryas and or shortly after it due to some kind of cataclysmic event. And to your point, right, there's a lot of just very sharp and steep, very, I would say, alludes to a quick and sudden change in geography as opposed to something that happened over 5 to 6 million years. I think it's very interesting and very, very plausible.
In looking at the Grand Canyon pictures before, it really took me a lot to not bring this up earlier. And I wanted to kind of end the conversation with this because we've talked about it so many times. And it's a nice tie-in to a lot of our other episodes. Knock Knock, that Ancient Egypt episode we did a couple weeks back. When you look at the Colorado River that's running through the Grand Canyon, to me it looks like a puddle. It looked like a river that wore this thing down. And again, I realize 5 to 6 million years is a very long time. I get that. But we have other rivers in the world. We have other bodies of water. And I don't know that we have the same typography or is that the right word for that?
That sounds right.
The same makeup. Yeah, I'll just use that word. We'll make that up. We'll make this count if it matters or not. But it doesn't look, nothing looks the same as the as the Grand Canyon. So to suggest that only the Grand Canyon was carved out like this, I realize that water can erode down rock. I totally get that. I'm not dismissing that fact. There's conflicting evidence, and this goes back to the ancient pyramids too, that the way the pyramids are eroded looks like it was underwater and it flushed them down. Yep. And that same evidence by people that are much smarter than us, geologists, are suggesting the same thing had happened here. And I don't know that we have a comparison to the Grand Canyon to show that, hey, by the way, like these rivers have done the same thing here, where we have these huge steep inclines. And I know we have hills and valleys and peaks, but it always felt like they're more gradual and not so sudden and kind of jerky and mished and moshed all around. That's another one I never thought I'd use on a public forum, mish and mosh.
I like it.
So yeah, I never really subscribed to the Great Flood theory. I always bought Noah's Ark as just a myth, but you see it come up in so much context outside of the Bible, the biblical flood, that it's getting hard to dismiss the fact that something might have happened.
Yeah, no, I think what sticks out to me that you mentioned was when you look at the Colorado River, what's so special about the Colorado River that it helped to form, or if you look at mainstream archaeology, geology, whatever sect of science you want to talk about, that's the sole reason that the Grand Canyon was formed. Well, the Nile River's been around a really long time. Why isn't there a giant canyon there? Right? Again, not our field of expertise. I know shit about rivers. Nor do you. I get that. I would love for somebody to give you some information, right? Why? What is so special about the Colorado River that it actually led to forming of the Grand Canyon? But we have millions of rivers all around the world, right? Why don't we see that in other places? This is the only one. The only one. Doesn't make any sense.
Of that capacity, of that scale.
Of that capacity, correct. Of that scale that would form something this large.
Right.
One of the great wonders of the world. What's so special about that river?
And the other thing is, and this is where I know we'll probably get a lot of hate by anybody that's really into this stuff, but I don't know that I buy a lot of these theories. Like, how can you tell me with pure accuracy that this took 5 million years? It's the same thing as like carbon dating stuff and whatnot. Like I realize that people, oh, well, you can take the sediments and you can tell the rocks and the soils. How do you know?
I know.
Nobody was here 5 million years ago.
I think about that shit all the time.
These are educated. Somebody somewhere along the line took a sample of something and then just extrapolated it out. So it's like saying, like, this year I'm going to watch how much gray hair I grow.
Yeah.
And I'm going to extrapolate it out. Well, if I took that sample when I was 19, I'd never turn gray because I never had any. And I would say it's going to take me 100 more years to do it. If I take that now and extrapolate that out, that means in 3 years, well, I guess it's plausible. I could be completely white-haired. But, you know, it depends on when you take that. It depends on when you're measuring it. There he goes. There's a baldy again over here. I got a good enough hairhead. I don't care if it goes white. I just don't want to lose the recede here. I never really subscribed to that stuff, and I hate sometimes in science. I love science. I'm so fascinated by it. I like to abide by the laws of science. I like to be the realist part of this conspiracy. But you're asking me to trust in a scientific process that's just a guess. It's a hypothesis. It's a guess.
Right.
There's no evidence. And we base everything based off of these rules of science, where if you go and ask, if you sat there and ask a geologist or anybody else in science, well, how do you know? Well, if you look at this study, they took the same. Well, how do you know that that's accurate? Well, because such and such did this study. But well, how do you know that that's true? Did you get in the time machine with John Teeter and go back and pull a sample and measure it and then sit it for 5 million years to see how good? You didn't. It's a guess. Yeah. And so, to me, as we discover new things every single day, why does that guess hold any more weight than our guess?
You're right.
What's the difference? And why can't there be a cataclysmic event that changes things? We saw how Hurricane, not Superstorm Sandy, impacted our small beach community in New Jersey. Yeah. And it changed the structure of a lot of... Now, we used modern technology to dump sand and recreate our barrier reefs and barrier islands and whatnot. But it cut a hole right through one of the barrier islands where it's a whole new area. There's a whole new waterway going right there. Yep. That was in a day. That was a day. So you mean to tell me that it's not practical that maybe 12,000 years ago, a flood of that, a bigger magnitude, and Hurricane Sandy was a big flood. There's tsunamis. I mean, you look at how it happened. What was that? I don't want to say it was Japan. What was that? It was one Japan. Big tsunami. Was it Japan?
Yeah, it was Japan. Yeah.
That happened how many years ago? And it wiped out the whole town. The whole thing's gone. Wiped.
You're talking about the one, the one with the...
They made a movie after it.
Yeah, the one that knocked out the nuclear power plant, right?
No,
that one was in Japan,
but that's another one. Yeah.
Right, that one was definitely in Japan.
Tsunami.
I think there's been tsunamis in Indonesia. Sorry, Indonesia, if I'm wrong.
I think I might be thinking of the Indonesia one, the Impossible movie. What was this one though? That's what it was right there. Thailand. Okay, yep, this is the one about in Thailand. So if the tsunami comes in and just basically wipes out Thailand, and that's in an hour. It comes in and flushes it out. So you see these cataclysmic events happen. We know there's a history of it happening. The Younger Dryas, which you and I have started to dive deep into this all the time because it's coming up so often now, and it seems to be correlated to so many different events. Yeah. You look back at these biblical stories, I don't know, man, that to me is very intriguing. And sometimes, I'm not saying the whole Grand Canyon was carved out, because it's the same question, why there? But sometimes when you see like a hole on the side of a mountain that's a doorway, that is a cavern, why couldn't there have just been land that was there that just got ripped out and flushed out? And now the reason that cavern's up there is because the land, something big happened, cataclysms happened, and ripped through that there. Or maybe they saw this coming and they built a civilization there to protect themselves.
Yeah. Well, dude, look, we know. I shouldn't say we know, because if you listen to mainstream archaeology, they're going to tell you no. But if you look at the Scablands, which are in Washington, and if you believe in what Randall Carson says, which I do believe, right, that was formed by massive sheets of ice that came through and just fucking wrecked the entire area, just absolutely decimated everything in its path, and that's what actually created the Scablands. I think it's very... Now, granted, the Scablands are much farther north than the Grand Canyon, but when you look at the two, they're very similar in terms of the way that they... I say that with a grain of salt. Nothing quite truly looks like the Grand Canyon, but in terms of what massive sheets of ice and a flood ripping through an area, what that would do to the geography, it would look just like the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, I'm
And
going
I
to
say
pull that
that
up
in my
for
most
those watching right
uneducated
here.
way
So
possible.
here's a picture of what the Scablands would look like. Why does it never let me actually bring up the full picture anymore? There you go. I don't know if you could see this one right here. I'll just zoom in on this one a little bit here. Yeah, I mean, very similar in terms of how that looks right there with the big steep drops there.
I mean, if you didn't tell me that was the Scablands and you said, "Hey, dude, that's a picture of the Grand Canyon," and I go,
Grand
"Yeah,
Canyon.
sure, of course, that's Grand
I
Canyon."
have no idea. I have absolutely no idea.
Yeah.
I watched a movie. I've watched it many times before. Ryan Reynolds, one of my favorite actors, called The Chaos Theory, maybe a night or two ago.
What up, Van Wilder?
Van Wilder, my favorite. Chaos Theory, the long and short of it, is about a guy that plans his day out to the T, not dissimilar from myself, where he takes notes, makes lists, and he's very organized in his thinking. His wife sets his clock forward, trying to set it backward to give him some extra time, and actually makes him late for the day, which leads to a series of unfortunate events that throw him all off and make him rethink the way he considers organizing every single day. Chaos Theory. Everything goes wrong. And I often kind of wonder if we're so obsessed with answering every single question that sometimes we ignore that life is a chaos theory. Life could be a chaos theory. And why are we dismissing the fact that one chaotic, cataclysmic event could completely throw everything off? Yes, we realize that erosion can happen over a period of time, and that's great.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it can't, and maybe our method of measuring that is completely accurate. That's great too. But why is that mutually exclusive from chaos theory? That something cataclysmic came in, wiped that thing, hit that thing, changed the architecture, changed the landscape. You're saying that Earth was once Pangea, one giant continent too at some point.
Yep.
We know that tectonic plates shift all the time. That's why we're getting earthquakes. We're seeing geography change literally in a split. Like when a plate shifts and it opens a crack up in the ground, it's not happening over a million years. It's happening instant. It's happening in a day.
Split second.
Like,
yeah.
It's a split second. Here
Quite
you go.
literally
By the
split.
way, here's
Pun
your
intended.
fault. You're looking right down. Split. Yeah. Good wordplay. So I think the idea that the canyon is more tied to something like the Younger Dryas, to me, is more likely, or perhaps, I don't know where the plates are there. I know they're not in that particular area, but perhaps our tectonic plates moved, and the way they moved kind of cracked open a little different area. Maybe that correlates to that great flood. Maybe that correlates to the Younger Dryas.
Maybe it happened all at the same time.
Part of the events. Right. And that's what created this. And I think people, when they think of like the Noah's Ark story, just think about the whole world is submerged. That's not necessarily the case. Just go out into the middle of the ocean, right? You don't have to go out that far in the ocean. Go look at the bay when it's a really rough storm. Right now, as we record this, we're expecting crazy storms. By the end of the summer, if you're in the Northeast, you're going to get nor'easters. If you're in the Caribbean, you're going to get them. You're going to get crazy hurricanes and stuff. Watch how crazy the water gets just offshore when the waves start crashing. The further out you move, and you hear these stories about Arctic expeditions or boats chartering across, these waves are like stories tall, sometimes 100 stories tall.
Yeah, dude.
Now, imagine that on a grand, like again, the tsunami. Like you got 100-story wave that came off the beach.
Yeah.
Now imagine that's happening in all different places all at once. And you just have this water crashing and rushing through all these areas. And it's just, there's just so much activity. I don't think it's implausible to think that. And like we saw in Göbekli Tepe with the intentional burial, like that one town that I can't remember what it is, the one we were talking before in Turkey. We'll have to find that out and do an episode on that one itself. But I mean, the place looked like a bunker, and it was built into the ground, like they were protecting themselves from that, kind of up in an elevated area. Is that not the same situation here? Is it possible that these things exist with the scale of the Grand Canyon? In fact, we know that there's cavern and caves in there.
Darren Kuyu.
Is it possible there? Darren Kuyu, yes. Wow. There you go. Did you just look that up?
Yeah, I looked it up. I don't remember that.
I
remember a lot of shit, but I don't remember that one.
Yeah, all right.
I typed softly. You told me once I was typing too loud, so I typed very softly.
Oh, you used to like crank the guy.
I know.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do an episode on that. That one is so much fun. Darren Kuyu. Don't even try to announce. Just type it into Google and have it autocorrect you, because that's gonna be.
I believe it's Darren
Kuyu.
Sure. Just type in town in Turkey where the caves are. Trust me, you'll find it.
Underground civilization. But where do you think that leaves you? You think there's something under there? Do you think there's a civilization there? You think it's aliens? I mean, we didn't touch on the alien aspect on it.
No, we didn't. Well, you know what it is. The alien thing is just so. I mean, in that part of the U.S. is just. I mean, there is so many sightings in that area. It happens to be so close to Area 51. Look. I mean, we can go down a real big fucking rabbit hole right now, which we're not going to. But it could be anything. So no, I don't think it's an ancient alien type of thing or any recent alien kind of thing. I think that it is very much so possible, and I think very likely that some culture at some point in time inhabited caves within the Grand Canyon. Do I necessarily believe that they were Egyptian? I'd like to. It's one of my favorite theories out there. I love the idea of lost civilizations, of transoceanic, whatever you call it, passage, if you will. I think it's absolutely fascinating. I think it's more likely than not that actually did occur. So I do think that there can be some very, very ancient civilizations that could have resided within that area that we know absolutely nothing about today. Does it necessarily line up with the dynastic Egyptians? Maybe not. But I certainly think that people did live there, for sure. What do you think?
I'm on board, man. I think just listening to Native American people, I was so fascinated by them when I was growing up. I loved Indians. I mean, I used to have like all different memorabilia and stuff. I used to go to what's the ones that are here in New Jersey? I can't remember the name of them now.
The Algonquins?
No, I don't think that was the ones. No, definitely wasn't. I thought it was something to see. Not Cherokee, but there was like a little reservation up north that we had went to like in a class trip.
Really?
And I was like so fascinated by it. Yeah. But I've always been so kind of captivated by it, and I'm so captivated too by like the stories and the respect for ritual and the way that they've sort of looked at landmarks around the United States with so much respect and so much history, and they don't sugarcoat a lot of stuff. They always talk about, the sky people, or they talk about the ancients, and they talk about these civilizations. Again, stories have been passed down for generation to generation to generation. But this is also people that has largely not been as influenced by a lot. Not to say that they're not on technology. They certainly are in these days. But they're not as influenced by sort of outside narratives. They kind of have always governed themselves and lived on their own and really only paid attention to their own culture. So I'd like to believe what they're saying is true to some degree. Maybe their interpretation of it was off. And I love the fact that it's something here in the U.S.
Maybe it's our interpretation of what they were saying, right? So maybe they weren't off. Maybe we're off in the way that we're interpreting
maybe we're off.
Right?
Yeah, that's certainly true, too. They did have their own languages. They had their own way to describe things.
Yeah.
They also, to some degree, wrote in hieroglyphics at one point, too. So where did that come from? But yeah, it's just, we don't often get things that are kind of within our reach, so to speak, that we can go and kind of see ourselves. If there is anybody out there that kind of knows a secret pathway to adventure around the Grand Canyon, wants to take a
and if you want to pay for our trip, we're going, baby.
Hey, listen, I'll pay for the flights out there if you guys can show us around a pretty fun tour. That's a whole trip I'd love to take anyway, like out to that like Roswell area, out to the Grand Canyon at some point. Certainly not in the summer when it's just blistering hot out there. I'm sure it always is, but. I think that's
not
on the short list of maybe like a bucket list trip. Oh, goodness gracious, no. But if you guys like this topic, like this episode, or if you absolutely hated it, follow us on YouTube, subscribe, click the big subscribe button right there. Like the video, even if you hated it. Just give us the like, the courtesy like, the pity like, whatever you call it. You can follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Cocktails Conspiracies. You can follow us on Twitter, Conspiracy on X. We're on Spotify. Some of you are listening there. Instead of tracking all this down, just head over to conspiracyrealist.com. You can get all of those links. And that's it for us tonight, guys. We're back again next week with Ong's Hat. Another great story right here in New Jersey. So we're talking about things that are kind of in our neck of the woods. LFG. This one's right up the road from us, 30 minutes from where we're recording right now. So we welcome you guys for that. For me and Tim, man, it's Cocktails and Conspiracies. Hope you enjoyed your drinks. We'll see you again next time.